we'll go over those again. And then to review, just like what they're showing in the video, we talked about the proximal part of the humerus. You've got the head, the neck, and then what are these two bones here? Greater and lesser tubercles. And then the groove in between. It's either called the bicipital groove or the intertubercular groove. And what are the muscles that insert here? They cross the shoulder joint. They come from the back part. So I'm hearing words, but I'm not understanding. Latissimus dorsi, and then what goes along with the latissimus dorsi? Teres major. So those, they come quite a bit around to the front, so those are going to be internal rotators. And then working our way down here, what's this? Deltoid tuberosity. And then we talked a little bit about the distal part, but we'll get into a little bit more in detail. So you have two different articular surfaces on the distal humerus, and what two bones do they articulate with? Radius and the ulna. Okay. So does everybody remember what's the name of the part that articulates with the head of the radius? What do you wear on your head? Cap, right? Okay. Then the other one is the trochlea, right? So that's going to be this one here. So the capitulum is going to be lateral. Right? So just always think at the anatomical position, you have the radius is on the lateral side, so then the capitulum is going to be on this side, which leaves the trochlea on the medial side. And then we have these are also in a general sense, they're called condyles. They have specific names, they have the capitulum and the trochlea. So then what's going to be the part of the bone that's called, that goes near the condyle? Epicondyle, right? And then as you come up here, you have this ridge. So that's an epicondylar ridge. All right, so then the lateral epicondyle is going to be where pretty much all of your extensor muscles attach. Okay? Then the medial epicondyle is going to be where all your flexor muscles attach. So that's basically, and then what are these two different fossa called? What's the one on the back side called? Yeah, olecranon. And then the front? Is it coronoid or coracoid? Coronoid, because this is coracoid, this is coronoid. So now we get into the radius and the ulna. So then what bones does the proximal ulna articulate with? Humerus, and then what else? The radius, right? Because you have pronation supination occurs at that joint. It's called there's two different radial ulnar joints. Right, one here, one here. So then how are we going to differentiate those? What are you going to call this one? Proximal or superior, and then distal or inferior. Okay. And then you also have this other, it's not a true joint, but it's a functional joint, the middle radial ulnar joint, which basically what it is, it's an interosseous membrane. Kind of like a big broad ligament that holds the two bones together. So then on a lot of the bones, a lot of the long bones, you're always going to find, or not always, but in a lot of cases, you're going to have something that's called the head. You're going to have the head of the humerus, the head of the femur, the head of the radius, and then what's usually below the head? The neck. So you're going to have the neck with the radius. Okay? And then here on the ulna, we have the olecranon process, and then here they have the trochlear notch, and that's the part that articulates with the trochlea on the humerus. So then isolating out the radius by itself, so it's going to be on the lateral side of the forearm. Okay? It's going to be a little bit larger on the proximal end versus it's going to be a little smaller on the distal end. I mean, it's larger on the proximal end and smaller. I didn't get the next one. This is the distal part. Okay? It's larger on the distal part and smaller on the proximal part, whereas the ulnar is the opposite. The ulnar makes up more of the elbow joint, whereas it's a smaller portion of the wrist. Okay? And so then basically, like we said, on the superior surface you have the head, and that articulates with the capitulum. Okay? Then you're going to have the radial tuberosity or the radial styloid here. All right, now we'll talk about the ulna. So again, that's going to be, now we're talking about on the medial side. So it's a little bit longer than the radius. And it's going to form the major part of the elbow joint and then a smaller part of the wrist joint. So on this, you're going to have the olecranon. You can have the coracoid process on the anterior surface, the radial notch, and then the styloid process over here. So if you ever wondered what the arms look like in birds and bats and things like that, you can see they're pretty much the same type of thing, where the differentiate is in the hand, bones of the, what's so-called hand part. Okay, you're going to have one proximal bone, two in the middle here, and then the bones of the hand are going to be formed differently. So here you have the styloid process of the ulnar and the radius, the interosseous membrane, and then other things that we basically covered. So now we get into the bones of the hand. Okay? Again, there's three main groups here. What are these called? Carpals, metacarpals, and flanges. So we're on page 70. And then we'll get into naming all these ones. And now we'll be talking about this area. It's called the anatomical snuff box. Okay, that's going to come up later in terms of point location, orthopedics, things like that. So if we go on an anatomical position here, you can have the ulnar border, which is going to be this side, and then the radial border over here. So the ulnar border is going to be the extensor pollicis longus, which is going to be this one right here. Okay. So extension of the thumb is going to be back like this. Okay. The extensor pollicis longus is going to be this one here. And then you have on the radial side is going to be the adductor pollicis longus and the extensor pollicis brevis. And there's going to be these here. So that's going to be on this side. So it's basically, that's that little snuff box right there. Okay? So you have two muscles on this side and one muscle on that side. Okay? And when we go over the individual actual muscles, it will maybe help you understand a little bit better.